Hello, you beautiful people. So today we are back talking about some injury updates. There's a lot of unfortunate injuries that have been going around the league, so I'm going to talk about how they affect your fantasy team, which guys on their teams are going to have a boost in their fantasy values, which guys I think might take a next step up and fill up the absence on their teams, and just sort of give you some overall opinions on how I think the teams are going to look with these injuries, from a fantasy perspective, that is. So before we begin, I should apologize for the lack of videos. Just been really busy with school, end of semester coming up, got exams, final papers and everything, but after December 16th, I'm officially free, and I'm going to try to post very consistently after that. I'll probably try to get back to the usual 5 videos a week before everything got crazy. But yeah, thanks for sticking with me throughout this time. Sorry about the lack of videos, but yeah, I won't hold you guys here any longer. Don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe if you're new. What makes up for my shitty upload schedule is the Discord. If you want to join that through the link in the description, it's a very active community that'll help you guys with any fantasy questions you have, whether it be waiver wire, trade questions, rate your team, anything you want really. So definitely consider giving that a look. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into the video. Alright, so start off. That's officially it. MPJ owners, he's out. He's gone for the season. This was one of my worst takes at the start of the year. I ranked him inside my top 40. I think I had him ranked 40th, and that was just way off. That was terrible. That's probably the biggest L I'll take when I react to my rankings at the end of the year. But anyways, nothing we can do about it now. We just move on, look at who's going to fill up the gap. I feel like the Nuggets were sort of in a tentative situation where they were like waiting for him to get back. So it was like a bit of a stretch to see like how they were going to stack up when they're like all healthy, other than Michael Porter Jr. And I think the main beneficiary, other than Will Barton, who's pretty much rostered in like 70% of leagues, so I doubt you're going to be able to get him off the waiver wire, is Aaron Gordon. And Aaron Gordon, I wasn't very high on him for fantasy going into the season just because Michael Porter Jr. was there. And Aaron Gordon, the thing with him for fantasy is like he doesn't really contribute like an insane amount in any one statistical category. He's just very mediocre across the board. So it really just doesn't translate to good fantasy numbers. But when you up the usage rate, his points per game, I would expect a pretty big increase. I would imagine they're probably going to be around 18 now, just because like the Nuggets really don't have anyone. If we look at his last few games, 28 points, 16 points, 11 points, 18, and 20 points. I feel like that's probably going to continue just because, like I mentioned with the Nuggets, it's just so bare, man. Like, they have no scoring, no creation, essentially, outside of Jokic. And, like, not like Michael Porter Jr. was helping that much this season, but we were all anticipating him to. And if we look at other options on the Nuggets, I mentioned him in previous video. Monte Morris, I think, for my deeper leagues, is a really good pickup for now. Very smart point guard, low turnover rate. His assist to turnover rate is always one of the best in the leagues. So if you're in a category league, he's going to help you a lot in the assist department, low turnovers as well, like I mentioned. And then he does contribute a few solid amount of points per game, so I think he's a very solid waiver wire pickup here in like a 14-team league and up, maybe even 12-team if you wanted to stretch that far. And other guys on the team I'm looking at, Jeff Green, again for the deeper leagues. He's very low rostered. I think he's only rostered in about 2.6% of leagues. And he is capable of having some pretty big nights. I'm not expecting it to any kind of consistency whatsoever, but you never know, here and there his minutes are probably going to go up. He's been getting around 30 minutes a game the last 7 days, so getting that kind of minutes, I mean, he's bound to have a few good fantasy games, so it could be worth a flyer if you're in a deeper league. And yeah, pretty much most of the guys that are going to benefit are pretty much deeper league pickups. The only guys that I would consider that are going to help you if you're in like an 8 to 12 team, Aaron Gordon and Will Barton, obviously, so not too much talking about them there. Pretty obvious. I've mentioned what I think about Gordon and Barton. Obviously must roster. If you don't have him on your team, I don't know what you're doing. If he's on the waiver wire in your league, pick him up. I don't care if you're in an 8-team. I mean, 6-team, fair enough. I mean, I don't really know a lot of people that play 6 teams, but your guys' waiver wires are stacked, so I wouldn't worry about him too much. But 8-team and up, absolute necessity to have him on a roster. And then, yeah, Bones Highland is someone I want to give a brief mention to. I was a little bit lower on him after Jokic got hurt, and the Nuggets were very barren just because, like, I hadn't seen too much out of him, and he was dealing with a bit of an injury risk. Or not an injury risk, but he hurt his ankle is what I meant to say. But I mean, as the time I'm recording this, he just had a pretty solid game against Miami. He had 21 minutes, put up 19 points, 33 fantasy points. And even if we look back to that other stretch, he's not getting a ton of minutes a game, which is the only reason I'm hesitant to add him in like very like shallow leagues, but he's only been getting around 20 minutes a game. But for my deeper leagues, I'm perfectly fine if he's on the waiver wire, taking a flyer on him if you're in like a 16 team and up. I don't see the harm in that. You never know. His minutes could see an increase now that's like confirmed. Michael Porter Jr.'s out there. Rotation might look a little bit different. We'll start to see something become more solidified. But that's gonna do it for Michael Porter Jr. This was sort of his impact that his injury has on the impact his injury has on the Nuggets. This was sort of a long-winded explanation, but I just want to make sure I cover every base so I don't leave you guys hanging or leave you guys with any questions. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into the sponsor for this video. Today's video is sponsored by Parlay Play. So Parlay Play is a social-first fantasy sports operator. Focused on player prop game types, it allows you to connect and interact with friends and others during live events. So, by sponsoring with Parlay Play, they've provided me with my own code to refer you guys. So if you go ahead and join Parlay Play through the link in the description and use the code TheBasketballPhilosopher when you sign up, you'll receive 2 free $5 risk-free entries upon signing up. So I'll just go ahead and show you guys some of the features they have on their app here. I'm going to go ahead and make this is the free-to-play section, so they have 5 of these a week, 3 for football, NFL, or college, and then 2 for the NBA, and they usually have a prize pool of around $125, so I'll just go ahead and show you guys how they work. I think this is a really cool feature to have. It's literally free to play as long as you make an account, and you have a chance to win some money, so who doesn't want that? I mean, it's risk-free. I think it's worth the shot. So Trey Young against the Hawks, how many points do I think he's going to score? I'm going to go ahead and give him like 23 to 26. So as you can see, there's a range here. If he scores here, I get the most points. If he scores around here, I get 50 points towards my total. Bradley Beal against the Timberwolves. Go ahead and give him 25, 27. Nuggets. This is a really nice feature that I think a lot of you guys would enjoy. It's called Parlay Points, and it works very similar to fantasy points, as you can see here. Points are worth 1, rebounds are worth 1, etc. Aaron Gordon, I mean, if we're thinking with like MPJ being out now, I think that's easily over 23.5, so I'm going to go ahead and choose that. Kyle Lowry. Oh, that's easy. I'm going to go over that, especially with Jimmy Butler being injured. Tatum against the Sixers. He always has big games. I'm going to give him 26 to 29. Bucks versus Hornets. I mean, it's Giannis, bro. I'm expecting a 30-piece at least. Ooh, Luka against the Pelicans. Oh, easy. And then Clippers. I'm going to take Paul George. So then I just get to hit submit here. And yeah, so this is for December 1st. So all the games that are happening on this day. I want you guys to go ahead and click the link in the description and sign up at ParlayPlay.io, and make sure you guys tell me who you've picked. Let me know if you agree with my picks. We can all compete against each other. As you can see, it closes in 2 days, so make sure you sign up now. Use the code TheBasketballPhilosopher when you make an account. And yeah, thank you guys so much for this. Big shout out to Parlay Play for sponsoring this video. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get right back to it. Alright, so moving on, we got the Morant injury, and this is just really shitty to see, man. You always hate when the best player on a team gets hurt, but in situations like this, when it is the best player that goes down, it's really the whole team that takes a huge boost in terms of their fantasy values. So obviously you got the main guy, probably Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't really know who's going to be their main guy. I think it's going to be a lot of shared distribution, but I would expect his fantasy numbers to probably be the highest. Steven Adams, I mean, his minutes have been lower than you'd like, but I think without Ja, he's probably going to get a few more opportunities. Not like their pick and roll game's going to be happening, but I do think Steven Adams still probably a solid pickup in like 12-man leagues and up. Dylan Brooks, obviously, I think he's must roster. I had him as must roster anyway. His minutes are still working their way up from like he was coming back from an injury, so if you're worried about the low minutes, I wouldn't expect that to continue for too long. They really need his offensive production. He plays great on the defensive end, so not too much I'm worried about there. And then someone who has become very popular, and I'm also a huge fan of, is Desmond Bane. I have him in a few personal leagues of mine. He's just been a really solid player with Morant out. Even when Morant's in, he's been putting up some really decent fantasy numbers. And there's been some reports that he's going to be running the point guard a little bit now. He's getting more comfortable with the ball in his hands. His assist numbers are pretty low, but he's a really good shooter. He's averaging like 19 points per game. And looks like he's really stepped up and taken a big leap for this foreseeable future while Morant's not in the lineup. So I would consider him a very solid pickup in all the way up to 10-team leagues. And then another guy who I think is being slept on actually is Anthony Melton. People are sort of forgetting what he was doing at the start of the season when even just Brooks was out. Now that Ja's out, his minutes are still a little bit lower than you'd like them to be, but I do expect him to still contribute at an alright rate for fantasy. So I would pick him up in probably like a 14-team league and up, maybe a 12-team if I was feeling, if he's on the waiver wire and some of the other more suitable options are picked up already. You never know, might be worth a streamer, at least in my opinion. Then Tyus Jones, looks like he was getting his minutes, took a bit of an increase with Morant going up. He is a more traditional point guard, like he's good at like facilitating. What I mean by that, he had 8 assists last game against Sacramento. I mean, the scoring numbers aren't really there, but hopefully they can take a little bit of an increase with the minutes uptick, but that remains to be seen. And then lastly, just someone I want to throw in here. This is for like my 20-team league guys because I picked him up in my 20-team just on a flyer. I mean, his minutes, he's been getting around 18 minutes per game, so I was like, hey, why not? It's going to be John Conchar, if I'm pronouncing that right, Konchar. And, I mean, he played really solid against Atlanta. He had 17 points, 5 rebounds. And then against Sacramento, in 19 minutes, he had 9 points and 9 rebounds. So, I mean, in the 20 teams, if you're in one, you know what I'm talking about. The waivers are bare. There's nothing on there. I think he could be worth a stream. So, I think that's going to wrap it up in terms of the Grizzlies' impact on Morant. It looks like they haven't provided, like, a stern timetable on when Ja's going to be returning into the lineup. but it's probably not going to be for a month or so. But there's no timetable for his return right now, so I'm not going to put any emphasis or like put a guess forward other than like I shouldn't have even said a month really, because I honestly have no idea, and I don't think anyone really does at this point in time. We can sort of estimate, but nobody has anything concrete, so don't be asking in the comments like, oh, when's Ja coming back, or when are any of these guys coming back, because all we can do is read the reports as well as you can. So just go ahead and click on them on fantasy, look at the injury reports. Nobody has like some mystical secret or an insider with the Grizzlies. I doubt there's going to be an insider with the Grizzlies chilling in the comments section, so just do your own research, look at the injury reports. That'll help you a lot more than asking someone else will, because they're just going to be doing that exact same thing. Anyway, that was a long-winded explanation as usual, but let's just go ahead and get into the next player. And now sort of on the flip side, we have someone that's returning from injury. So we've finally got a good report on Zion Williamson. He's going to begin practicing in full pretty soon. Their next practice so on December 2nd, and his timetable hasn't been firmly set, but it's probably going to be sometime in December is the best estimate right now. And with that looming on the horizon, there's no guarantee he's going to stay healthy for the whole season, so I'm not going to say like trade for Zion, because I would just be a little bit hesitant, because you're probably going to have to give up more than you would before this like news was announced. But I think the major one that everyone's becoming pretty aware of is Jonas Valanciunas' value. And I mentioned that I wasn't too concerned about it, because like I do expect him to still be around that 40 fantasy points per game, just because the rebounding rate is very solid. But there is that fear that Zion is going to cut into that a little bit. Zion's not like the hugest rebound stats in the world, if you know what I mean. Like he's grabbing like probably around 7 per game. It's not like he's grabbing anything upwards of 10, but even with that, it does take some rebounds away from Jonas Valanciunas, so that is just something to be weary of. And personally, if I have him on my team, I'm probably looking to trade him. Just to give you guys some idea of his value, I have seen some people trading him for Sabonis. I don't know how people are pulling that off, but I have seen it like 3 or 4 times now, so I just feel like it's worth putting it out there if you wanted an idea of his market value. I think that's a really solid trade if you can somehow capitalize on that. And it's just really unfortunate timing to try to trade Jonas, because he has sort of been on a stretch of poor performances, and they're all sort of explainable. I don't know if you guys have been watching the Pelicans, which if you haven't, I don't really blame you, but one game he was in foul trouble, another game he was injured, wasn't going to return to the game, and then he came back. Another game was a blowout, so he didn't really play. So if you just sort of want to explain that when you're trying to trade with someone, because if they just look at his recent stretch, they'll just be like, oh, I'm not trading for Jonas, he's been shit. But there are reasons to it. Like, it's not like he just hasn't been hitting shots or anything. His minutes have been very low because the Pelicans are so trash that they just get blown out, or it's just foul trouble, or just random things. But it's just really unfortunate when you're trying to trade a guy and then they start going on a cold stretch. But I mean, if you can't trade him, I don't see him falling below like 37 fantasy points per game. I think Zion honestly just boosts the overall like ability of the Pelicans team so greatly that even for fantasy, while he does take away a lot of shots, the Pelicans are just in such a dire state. Like, they're not really scoring the ball anyway, so I think everyone's numbers will probably take a little bit of an increase, even though the points category will be a little bit scarcer for them, if you know what I mean. Hopefully that made sense, but whatever. We'll just move on. Next up, Brandon Ingram. It's pretty much just the big three on the Pelicans. I really think Zion's going to help Brandon Ingram because he has been struggling so far this season. I would consider him a massive buy low player right now. He's averaging like 29.7 fantasy points per game this season, and like last season, just for reference in case you guys are new, he was averaging around 39 fantasy points per game, and that's with Zion playing. So I would expect that to take a pretty large increase. I don't think there's any way he finishes the season like below 35 fantasy points per game at the very least. So that 5 fantasy points per game for like a very low risk option in my opinion, because I'm like pretty confident he's going to at least get to 35. I think that's a very good price to pay. Like, you can definitely cop him at a buy low. So he's going to be a player that I would definitely try to trade for right now, just because I do think Zion being back will... Ooh, voice crack. You got to love that. I do think Zion returning to the lineup will help Ingram get a few more easier looks, because defenses won't be able to focus on him so much. But yeah, in terms of everyone else on their team, I mean, not a lot of really good fantasy options anywhere across the board. Alexander Walker's just really been struggling with efficiency. Devontae Graham has just never really been efficient, so I mean, don't really know what to expect there. Especially for points leagues, I mean, just really not viable options. I think they're rostered in way too many leagues right now, just off a namesake. Like, they're both rostered in around 75% of leagues, which, like, I don't really know what we're doing here. I wouldn't roster them in an 8-team, honestly. Upwards of that, I probably would, but 8 teams and below, like, these guys aren't really worth a roster spot, in my opinion. But yeah, try to trade for Brandon Ingram. Moral of the Zion story, try to trade away Jonas Valanciunas. If you can't, I mean, it's just unfortunate that he went on this streak, but hey, not going to kill you if you keep him on your team, you know what I mean? And yeah, hopefully Zion comes back and can stay on the court. I mean, he was looking pretty chunky in those pictures, but I mean, who knows? Maybe he'll be better than we all think and go back to previous Zion years, but I would definitely avoid trading for him. I think I mentioned that already, but just to really emphasize that point, because you're not going to get him at a buy low when the managers see the report that he's returning soon, and it's just not really worth the risk because he could very easily just get hurt again. You don't really, like we all know, like explosive athlete with that much weight on him, it's a risky play, you know? So anyway, that's going to do it for the Pelicans. I'll just go ahead and tell you guys who the next player on my list is. Alright, so I'll try not to talk about these players for too long because I realize I just ramble on because, I just love talking about fantasy basketball and just sort of get distracted, and I assume nobody wants to listen to me talk about shit for that long, so apologies, but we'll just go ahead and get a little bit speedier for this one. It's going to be Klay Thompson, and it looks like he is following his rehab that he's going to be back before Christmas. It looked like that's going to be on track so far, no setbacks or anything, and that's just really great to hear, man. I really hope Klay Thompson can come back into the lineup and just start getting back to his former self. Wish him the best of luck. But if we look at it from a fantasy perspective, Jordan Poole, man, it's time to sell high. I mean, he could back up Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, but I just don't see the usage being there. I don't see the fantasy points per game being this high. I'm trying to sell high on him if I can, no matter what. I just think this is a crucial time to sell high on him. I think he's probably going to take his minutes are still going to be fairly high, but I think it's probably going to take, as Klay gets more integrated into the lineup, a pretty steep drop in terms of his fantasy production. So I'm just looking to move him right now. This is probably the guy that's I think is going to be affected the most. Secondary, Andrew Wiggins. He's been on fire lately, honestly. He's had a few really solid games for Andrew Wiggins, which, if you're new to fantasy, this is not the norm for Andrew. He doesn't really contribute anything outside of the scoring category. So, again, selling high on Wiggins right now. Wiggins and Poole, if they're on my team, I'm offering them to most people, trying to trade them away. No guarantee that Klay's going to be healthy, but like I said, just the risk that if he is healthy, their fantasy values are just going to be so low compared to what they are now. I think it's really worth your time to try to trade them for some better players. And then outside of that, I don't really think anyone else's fantasy value that's relevant for fantasy is going to take too big of a hit. I think Draymond is probably going to get better, honestly. He's one of those rare players where his value doesn't really come from scoring, it's the assists. So just having two great off-ball players, I mean, we've seen it before when Klay and Steph are all on the court together. Draymond just really facilitates and just creates a ton of shots for the two of the Splash Brothers. So expecting his value to take an increase. So I mean, I would try to trade for him. His value, he's been pretty consistent though, so I don't know if any managers are going to be trying to trade him away. He's probably going to average around 35 fantasy points per game at the end of the season, which is approximately where he's at now. But I mean, who knows, with Klay coming back, that I could see that maybe squeezing up to 37, 38 if we're being very optimistic. So even just that little increase, I think it is worth trying to buy low on him. But yeah, not too much to talk about in terms of Klay Thompson's injury. I just try to sell high on Jordan Poole and Wiggins. And I wouldn't try to trade for Klay for the same reason I wouldn't trade for Zion necessarily, because you're not going to be able to buy low on him anymore. And I'm just a little bit skeptical about trading for guys that are coming back from pretty serious injuries. It's just I don't want to take the risk. Good for you if you have him on your team. I definitely wouldn't drop him or trade him. Might as well take it. I don't think you're going to get a good offer. And I wouldn't give him a good offer, honestly. That's as weird as that sounds, it's a paradoxical situation where if he's on their team, they're pretty much stuck there because I'm not trading for him. I don't know how he's going to look. I don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy. And if he's on your team, it's you're not going to get a good offer because everyone's sort of factoring that in. So keep Klay Thompson. Don't trade for him. Trade Wiggins, trade Poole. Summary. There we go. On to the next guy. Now, I know this is not related to the player that's on the screen at all, but I just want to take a minute to appreciate the Sabonis game tonight. Literally has nothing to do with this at all, but if you're new to the channel, I just love me some Sabonis. He had 25 rebounds, 10 assists, 16 points. And people were worried saying that the Pacers were crowded, man. Trust in Sabonis, bro. One of the steadiest fantasy players of all time. I love him so much. I always try to get him on my teams. Anyway, completely off topic. I'll just go ahead and talk about the next player on my list, Jalen Green. His injury is more short-term than any of the other guys on this list so far. I just wanted to go ahead and felt like it was worth talking about because I do think there are some developments while he is out. He suffered a left hamstring injury on the 26th. And before anyone comments I'm late, I know I'm late. I'm late on all of this. It's whatever. Get over it. Anyway, he's going to be reevaluated in 1 week from that point, which doesn't even mean he's going to be returning then. It'll probably be another week at least. But in the meantime, I think Kevin Porter Jr. is a must-roster player. He's had a few really good games so far with Jalen Green being out. I didn't think Jalen Green's presence was affecting him that much because he was still the primary ball handler and everything. He had a triple-double against OKC, 23 points against Charlotte with 12 assists, 14 points with 9 assists against Chicago. And this is sort of the Kevin Porter Jr. we were expecting. Going into the season, he was very high on a lot of people's draft boards. In hindsight, way too high. And I mean, we all know he's inconsistent. The turnover rate is ridiculous, but overall, I think he's a must-roster player for this time period while Jalen Green is out because The Rockets hardly have anything going for him anyway, and Kevin Porter Jr.'s really just been running the point all season, and while he's on a good stretch of form, I think it is worth making the investment and picking him up. Next player, if you listen to my buy low video, don't mean to pat myself on the back, but Christian Wood has been tearing it up the last 3 games. 42 fantasy points, 68 and 60. Well, obviously, I don't think that's going to maintain. That's why I did consider him a buy low, because he does have the potential to have games like this. He had a 20-20 game, 33-point game. He's just a really nice fantasy player, and I think people were sort of getting worried because of his lack of performances that have been good so far, but I did expect him to turn it around, and it looks like he's trending in the upwards direction, so props to anyone who bought low on him. Then outside of those two, for the Jalen Green injury, maybe going for a Sean Tate. He's someone that I advocated for in one of my previous videos. This one's for my deeper leagues. I think he's a solid waiver wire ad. He's only rostered in about 10% of leagues right now. Had a really solid game against OKC and Charlotte. And his minutes are a bit up. He's getting around 27 minutes per game right now, so definitely worth a streamer if you're in a deeper league. And then lastly, Eric Gordon. This is for my very deep leagues. I had him. I drafted him in a 20 team, and yeah, he's been pretty solid because like the Rockets haven't really been having that much stability in their backcourt, and Silas just wants to play their veterans. I don't know, that's a whole thing. We're not going to get into that. Not too relevant for fantasy. It's just really weird situation that the Rockets are in. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, Eric Gordon, good pickup for deeper leagues, especially while Jalen Green's out. He's starting at the shooting guard position, so worth a shot. And then, yeah, there is the John Wall report that they're talking about, like, he wants to work his way into games, and, like, who really knows? But if I'm in, like, a 16-team or up league, I'll probably pick him up. If I'm not dropping anyone important and it's just a streamer, might as well pick him up. There's probably going to be some news, like some concrete news this week, because, like, Silas said that Ball's working his way into game shape right now as the discussions continue. And, if he does play, who knows? Maybe I don't think he's going to start. He'll probably come off the bench. Could contribute. I'm not considering him, like, a must roster by any stretch of the imagination, but he has a nice upside grab, I suppose, if you're in a deeper league and you're not dropping anyone important. So, yeah, that's going to do it for the Jalen Green injury. Christian Wood, massive W if you bought low. Kevin Porter Jr., must roster. Sean Tate, must roster for my deeper leagues. Same with Eric Gordon. And then John Wall, upside pickup for like my 14-team and up leagues. Alright, so the last player that I want to talk about who just got injured is Jalen Suggs. But before I do, I had a few extra players that I don't really want to devote a whole section to them because, like, I don't think they're that important. But just in case you were wondering, Brook Lopez is coming back soon. Only thing I would do, sell high on Bobby Portis. I think he's a great player to sell high on right now. He's been having a really good stretch, and people are forgetting, like, when Brook Lopez is in the lineup, Portis' minutes are way down. He's not really that relevant for fantasy as he is right now. So great time to sell high on him. And then, yeah, I think that's it. Thomas Bryant is expected to come back a little bit soon, but until there's more concrete reports, I wouldn't worry too much about trading Montrez or anyone like that, or Gafford. So we'll just have to wait and see there. But anyway, as unorganized as possible, as always, Jalen Suggs just happened as I was recording this. News just came out. Fractured his thumb. Don't know when he's going to be back. Obviously, the main beneficiary in my eyes, Cole Anthony, but he's also hurt right now. He's had an ankle injury for 6 consecutive games now, so it is more of a severe ankle injury from the sounds of it. We don't know when exactly he's going to be back, but for the time frame when they're starting backcourts out, Fultz is still out, Isaac's out. I'll talk about Isaac a little bit in a second here, but Fultz is working his way up. He's doing more contact and court work, but it's still not clear when he's going to be back. I don't think it's anytime soon, so I'm probably not going to stash him. Someone was asking me if they should stash Fultz. I definitely wouldn't stash Fultz right now, definitely not at this point in his rehab. I think the sleeper picks here that if I'm looking at picking up is RJ Hampton. I think he's really going to benefit. I think his minutes will increase. They were a bit low today, but that's because Suggs was playing. He didn't hurt his hand until very late in the game. And then obviously someone who is more heavily rostered than RJ Hampton, and for good reason. I think while these two are out, Franz Wagner, absolute must roster player. I'm probably rostering him all the way up to 10-team leagues, while Cole Anthony and RJ Hampton are out at least as a streamer. He had a really solid game tonight against Philadelphia, dropped 27, 40 fantasy points. And yeah, most people are aware of him, but he is only rostered in 22% of leagues, so I do think that should be a bit higher, at least while the starting backcourt's out, absolutely. And then not too much to talk about with Wendell Carter and Mo Bamba. Everybody knows they're must roster. They're rostered in like around 75% of leagues for the both of them. No surprises there. I'm just looking for guys here that are like deeper ads. But yeah, I think it's just going to be RJ Hampton, who's my pick for like my very deep leagues. I think he has some sneaky upside while the two of them are out. I wouldn't stash Fultz. And then I'll just go ahead and talk about Jonathan Isaac, man, because I don't really get why people are so high on Jonathan Isaac. He doesn't have a return table. He's not that great for fantasy, for points leagues. I mean, even when he is playing, like, there's not that much upside, in my opinion, to, like, redeem the fact that you're going to have to stash him on your IR for many more months. It's looking like he's probably not going to play until, like, I don't even know, man. There's really not anything concrete. Fultz is probably going to be back before he is. So, yeah, Jonathan Isaac, I'm really not stashing him. Like, for categories leagues, sure, if you need some steals, some defensive stats, he is good at contributing in those, like, peripheral statistics, but points leagues is just really not worth the roster spot, in my opinion, unless you have, like, 3 IR spots or something stupid. I'm just not stashing him. I don't think it's worth it. I think people are heavily overvaluing a guy that's coming off of meniscus tear. He's not vaccinated, too, so there is that to consider. And, yeah, I'm just really not high on Jonathan Isaac. I don't really consider stashing him in, like, most leagues. Like, if I'm in a 14-team league, even then I'm probably not stashing him, but, like, 16 and up, like, sure, go ahead. You know what I mean? The waivers are dry. And, yeah, I think that's going to do it. Maybe you could see Gary Harris getting some more run. And obviously, his minutes were, like, pretty high as is. He was getting around 30 minutes per game while Cole Anthony's being out. But, again, it's Gary Harris, so, like, I don't know what you're really expecting because I don't know. It's weird with Gary Harris, man. Like, people were really high on him a few years ago. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he's only rostered in, like, 0.3% of leagues, and I'm not really expecting that to take too big of an increase. And, yeah, like I mentioned, like, this is, like, the Suggs injury is probably going to be long-term, but we don't know how long Cole Anthony's going to be out for, so I'm not necessarily saying that these guys are long-term rosters, but main takeaways for this one, just because I'm absolutely rambling, it's late, apologies for keeping you guys here, but if you'd made it this far, I really appreciate it. But I'm going to go ahead and pick up Wagner, absolutely. Mo Bamba, Wendell Carter, just sit back and enjoy the fantasy points they're going to give you. RJ Hampton for my deeper leagues, and I think that's everyone. I don't think I missed anyone. Those are my guys that I would consider looking at, and then maybe I'll come back to bite it, but I'm really not too big on Gary Harris. I mean, unless you're in a 20 team, then I said anything goes, bro. Those waivers be trash. But yeah, that's going to do it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is a bit of a longer video, but just wanted to really cover everything, go in depth into some more detail about player injuries, just some thoughts I was having, guys I'm looking to stream, guys I'm looking to trade away, etc. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and as always, I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day.